welcome back to the Sioux City Show. This is episode 7. I am here with congressional candidate JD Scholten. JD, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name's JD Scholten. I'm originally from here in Sioux City, and we launched our campaign last summer. I'm a Democrat running for the 4th Congressional District against Steve King.
So with that, running against Steve King, that's obviously a David and Goliath situation. He's I'm thinking 8-term incumbent.
He's
correct?
an 8-term incumbent.
Okay.
You know, what we're seeing right now, it's going to be a competitive race, and I happen to be 6'6", so maybe
There you go.
we can balance that David and Goliath ness out, and that goes with our campaign motto is standing tall for all. So
Awesome.
there you go.
So what brought about the desire to undertake this?
Yes.
challenge?
So it all started in November of 2016 when the election happened, and for me, it rubbed me the wrong way a little bit on seeing how things came about, and I ended up going home for Thanksgiving and saw my grandma. I was living in Seattle at the time, and my grandma, the last thing she said to me before I moved or flew back was, "You need to move back to Iowa and take care of our farm." Now, our family farm's 4 hours away from here.
Okay.
I grew up here in Sioux City, went to East High School and Morningside for a little bit before I transferred, and I played 4 years of professional baseball with Explorers and Canada and all over. But I was in Seattle, but I knew what my grandma meant by that, and about a month later she passed away. And when I was at the church, at the rural church where she was an active member most of her life, that's where I felt the pull to come on home.
Mm-hmm.
And the next month I was looking into things, and I was thinking about starting a business, didn't really know what, and inauguration happened. And the next day I went down to the Women's March, and I was just so moved by the raw power and energy I felt that day that I remember this article I read a couple years ago that said, life's not about the pursuit of happiness, it's about the pursuit of meaningfulness. And in that article, or in that moment of clarity, I knew I was coming back home, and I wanted to fight for what I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, coming back home I'm a 5th generation Iowan. It's who I am, and it defines me. And I have a lot of friends who are Democrats, and I have a lot of friends who are Republican, and we get along fine. But then there's these other folks that Steve King is way down over yonder, and that just doesn't set right with me. And part of our whole messaging is inclusiveness and bringing together an inclusive community, an inclusive economy, and an inclusive healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are important to me.
Great. So I think that something that is tough for me to put into perspective sometimes as somebody who lives in Sioux City, I'm from Sergeant Bluff originally, is that I see the people I interact with every day, and like you said, it's a pretty diverse group. It's
Mm-hmm.
Democrat, it's Republican. It's really pretty centrist over across the
Right.
board. But then there are apparently communities outside of the Sioux City, Ames, Council Bluffs area that do skew more into the Steve King target audience. That's his diehards. So how do you kind of capture that?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how far, like, he's out there, and
Mm-hmm.
there's definitely communities that are very strong Republican,
Mm-hmm.
but even amongst those, like, I view what he like presents is drastically different than what those people are. But at the end of the day, he can sell them on being a Republican.
Yep.
A Republican is a Republican. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I think in the last year and a half, we've really seen him take a turn. And we used to say, "Oh, that's just Steve being Steve," or I used to hear that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think people are starting to get fed up with it. And some of the examples I'm seeing, we outraised him 2-1 this last quarter. And in doing so, I've had a bunch of Sioux City Republicans who've reached out to me and said, "Hey, you have our support," and even a couple of them have contributed to my campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So our message is more than it's about not just beating him, but it's about standing for something too. And at the end of the day, I think with what we're seeing a lot nationally, it's if I can go out to people and they can see they can trust me, I think that goes a lot farther away than any like where I'm at on the spectrum politically.
Definitely. I really agree with that. And I guess as like somebody who's probably historically right of center, if you were to mash up all of my ideas, right, nothing stays in a certain camp. I have seen like my personal view of Steve King go from like, oh, he's the guy who isn't scared to like say that he shot a raccoon on his front porch and make a jab at PETA, which is like kind of
Right.
entertaining if you do fall on that right end of the spectrum, to kind of adopting more of the Donald Trump style of social media, which I'm not a big fan of,
Yeah.
as well as things that I find just really confusing as a person from Iowa, like refusing to take a Confederate flag off of his desk, when I'm just confused about how, as being from Iowa, why I would have
Right.
any support of a Confederate flag. I might as well put up like an ISIS flag right next to it as people who are standing up to the imperialism of America. In theory, it's not too much different.
Right.
Whether or not you want to consider that has blended into American heritage, but it's just like kind of weird for me to look at.
And that's exactly right. And that's why I'm a part of our campaign is and part of why I'm all doing this. Like I mentioned before, there's many different layers on why I'm doing this. And part of it is getting Sioux City back on the map. Growing up playing sports here, I just remember going down to Des Moines, and we always played a little extra harder because they got the nice uniforms, they got the publicity and the nice facilities, and I don't know, I just have this chip on my shoulder growing up here, and I absolutely love Sioux City, and I want to promote it the best way I can. This past Monday was the year anniversary of King's famous tweet, "We can't restore our civilization with other people's babies." And when that came out, I had a ton of friends who are not political and not from Iowa, and they all contacted me, and they're like, "Is this where you're from?"
Yeah.
And I had to say yes. And I wanted to say he doesn't represent us. But at the end of the day, it's in his job title. It says representative.
Yep. That was actually what I found almost most confusing and least representative of the area that he does represent, is that we do live in Sioux City, which, basically encompasses South Sioux, even though that's not his constituents. And where Sioux City at this point has whatever between 15 to 22% of a Hispanic population.
Right.
And I feel like that is a population combination between all of the different demographics we have here that integrate pretty well.
Right.
And it's kind of to the point now where like my grandma, who's in her 70s, like wants me to go get her a torta on the way over to her house.
I love it.
And I really do love that combination that we found ourselves with here. And the idea that, when he says we can't raise other people's babies, we know what population he's talking about.
Right.
And it was just confusing to me as somebody who lives in an area with such a great blend of traditional American and traditional Hispanic cultures to create this new blend of culture. It was really confusing of how he came to that conclusion that we'd be on board with that.
And I mean, Iowa has a long history of welcoming. And you look at, I think one of the first, now don't quote me on this, but one of the first Supreme Court cases in Iowa was a slave coming from Missouri, and that we were a free state. Yep. And then you look at, my background's athletics, and you look at University of Iowa and Iowa State were some of the first programs athletically to break the color barrier. And I mean, Jack Trice Stadium in our district in Ames, Iowa, is named after African American player who died on the field because he was brutalized and murdered on the field. And so, and I mean, those are the things that like Iowa's always been this welcoming place, and it's to say that it's not. That's at the end of the day, like that's what I'm fighting for, and that's what's in my heart, and that's what caused me to get uncomfortable is what I like to say. And I was living an easy life in Seattle, and Seattle was beautiful, enjoyed it, but this is home.
Definitely. So I saw the tweet that you had answered. I don't know if it's the only one, but definitely most recently on Pod Save America.
Oh, right.
Where you questioned, or your question to them was, how do Midwest Democrats, and I'm paraphrasing here,
Yeah.
how do Midwest Democrats combat the stereotype of the coastal elites?
Yep.
And that is a good thing. What was their answer to you?
They pretty much mentioned, and I'll say that that's a stereotype I've been fighting really hard, because you look at right now nationally, the head of the Democrats in the Senate is from New York, and the one for the House is from California. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it just feeds into the stereotype, and that's part of another layer of our campaign is trying to define what it means to be a Midwestern Democrat. And Jason Kander was here last night at an event with the Iowa Democratic Party here, and it was a good event. And he kind of went in on that same model of like what it means to be a Democrat in a mostly Republican area too. And at the end of the day, it continues to go back to, if you get out there and go to the people and you talk to them, do they trust you? And Jason Kander mentioned one of the first doors he ever knocked. He started talking policy with a guy, and the guy didn't agree on anything he said, and so he's kind of like, well, sir, good day. I hope you have a nice day. And he was about to move on. He starts moving on, and the guy goes, "Wait, do you have a yard sign? I'll put it in." He goes, I like how you just, I mean, we don't necessarily agree, but you stood up on your principles and you didn't budge. Mm-hmm. He goes, I respect that.
Yeah.
And part of that, part of my whole philosophy is I want to get out there to the people as much as possible. You got to balance the fundraising with getting out to the folks. And about a month from now, I hope to buy a used Winnebago RV, throw the logo on the side, and be pretty much nonstop until November, because to me, I'm looking forward to this because I love this. Mm-hmm. I love Iowa. My dad's from Larchwood, which is the very northwest corner. My mom's from just outside of Lake Mills, which is the very northeast corner. They met in Mason City. I was born in Ames when we were living in Nevada, and then I was raised here in Sioux City. So like this, I
hit all the areas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like growing up, I'm seeing family members, I'm seeing old friends, I'm seeing old baseball teammates and old coaches, and a lot of people who know my folks. It's fun for me. Mm-hmm. And the minute it stops being fun, I don't want to do it, I guess.
I can see that. Yeah. And I don't want to keep everything political by
no.
on this, but I do have, I guess, a couple more questions, just because like I, as a person who I'm hitting that mid to late 20s area where I'm kind of getting a little bit more conscious of
technically
that.
Like you're exactly who I want to target, the younger folks who are lean a little bit to the right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, here we are. So like, with combating that coastal elite stereotype, which like, I guess I'm going to be honest, I definitely do see that, because like even like Hillary Clinton put out a statement. I saw it yesterday, but I don't know when it was really said, was that basically like we don't do well with white men, we don't do well with white married women, like this, right. Like it's a bias, like almost like chalking it up to a problem with me, and I guess like
that drives me insane, because like it's so painfully one-dimensional, those mm-hmm. things, and like those are like the talking points of like consultants. Mm-hmm. I haven't hired one consultant yet. And honestly, on the RV, I want to get a bumper sticker that says, "I don't know Nancy Pelosi."
Yeah,
because I don't.
That'd be helpful.
I don't know her. And but at the end of the day, here's what I get really frustrated with the Democratic Party is that, well, I'll say this: in this district, I feel like I'm yelling and I'm screaming, mm-hmm. but I'm in a silo.
Yep.
Because I have more people from D.C. trying to tell me, oh, you should think about doing this, you should try and think about doing this, than I have, you guys should be doing this. It should work the other way around. It's not like the Democratic Party loves to talk about how horrible trickle-down economics is. Mm-hmm. Well, trickle-down politics is the same thing. Yep. What I'm going and talking to people about, I should be telling them, hey, this is what we should be talking about because this is going well here mm-hmm. in Iowa. And that's the version that I like. That's the Democrat that I want to be, is the one that gets out there, talk to the people, and be open on things.
Yes.
And I mean, today's the walkout day, the National Walkout Day, And when it comes to gun violence, I think we absolutely have to find a solution to end these mass shootings. What that solution is, I don't know. But I'm open to have that debate.
Yes.
And having that debate, respecting the Second Amendment, but at the same time, when 97% of America's it's polling are back for, or they want universal background checks, and stopping the loopholes on gun shows. That I don't know the polling on that one, but universal background checks 97%, and then actually just studying gun violence, which I can't remember the amendment off the top of my head, but there's an amendment about 20 years ago that was written that the Center of Disease Control cannot research gun violence. How are we supposed to find answers to these problems if you can't study it? And so that's what frustrates me. And what frustrates me in DC, the lack of just willingness to work together to get anything done. And so, but to your point exactly, I'm out there just trying to fight that stereotype every day.
A good thing for all that yelling you're doing back at DC is say, if you don't know about guns, stop talking about guns publicly, because I'm all for, I think that everybody is for increased safety.
Right.
Whether or not that comes at the expense of a ban is where people start to differ. But if it is, hey, we think that everybody who is currently legally allowed to buy guns can still buy guns, but we want to have universal background checks, make sure that we're doing things legally and the right people are getting guns. And we want to, maybe something like institute a 5-day waiting period like exists for handguns on rifles as well. Create like that kind of system. And then even with handguns, you can get if you are approved for a concealed carry permit, then you can get your handgun at the same rate you would get a rifle. If there was a system like that, I think that everybody can get on board for some kind of common sense.
Right.
Which is,
And that's in what the specificness, or like the I can't speak right now. I got to get a coffee. But like what the exact details are and everything, I'm flexible on. But we need something to get done, because doing nothing is not solving a thing. And what's cool to see with these students, I saw a tweet today that said, when our children when our children act like leaders and our leaders act like children, something's going to change. And so
you better watch out. Somebody's gonna make a stupid Tide Pod joke on those. That's that's my biggest pet peeve going on social media right now. Is like, oh, these same kids were eating Tide Pods 3 weeks ago. It's like, no, number one, no, they weren't. But nobody ate Tide Pods. That was like 3 people on YouTube, and now it's like a stereotype to define a generation for some reason. But yeah, and I guess because I'd consider myself a pretty I'd like to think that I think with common sense, right? But then the second that people get on CNN or even Fox News or whoever, probably Tucker Carlson's the guest who he brings on like the farthest fringe example of any movement that he can, so he can eviscerate them. But like they come on and they start talking about like, oh, this is 30 caliber clip ghost gun, and it's like, this guy can't make policy, and he can't tell me anything about policy because he doesn't even understand what he's talking about. Right. So, I think that there has to be some kind of, in terms of policy to get started rolling in the right direction, that does improve safety, which I think is like the biggest thing.
That's the goal. That's my goal. Yeah. And it's not about taking away guns or promoting gun advocacy. My only goal in my version of or my issue on gun violence is to find a way to stop it. And whatever the way, if there's a way to stop gun violence and for people to and there's no ban, let's do it. But if the studies show that we got to take one gun away, let's.
Have you ever been a gun owner yourself?
I've not.
Okay. And
I played sport. My grandpa was a hunter. I played sports in the fall and the spring, and during the winter, like during the hunting seasons, I always was very active in sports. So, but I mean, I was in gun safety in high school, like a lot of kids were. I don't know if you had it in Sergeant Bluff, but
I didn't.
Okay.
My dad was in the military. I
Okay.
mean, we're not like definitely not a gun nut family,
Yeah.
but like was raised with a respect for firearms, I
Right.
guess. And with that, do you mind if I tell you like I think the like ultimate train of thought that leads towards like people who are pro-gun,
Oh, yeah.
probably more so than I am, that leads towards a worry about any type of ban, and the word ban even being introduced into the discussion is that so the first on the chopping block, right, would be an AR-15, quote unquote, an assault rifle that has a 30-round clip, right? So, at that point you have a semi-automatic rifle, one trigger squeeze equals one bullet, and a 30-round magazine. So the question that makes it more lethal is the rate of fire as well as the capacity of the magazine.
Yep.
So, as a gun owner, you say, all right, well, let's ban that. And then so the next school shooter brings in, and this is a horrible, macabre situation to propose, but the next school shooter comes in with a Glock with a 30-round barrel or a 30-round drum at the bottom of a Glock that hasn't been banned yet. So now they're also using a semi-automatic pistol with a high-capacity magazine. Same issue is it's literally the same firing system as an AR-15, and now that gets banned because everybody goes, yep, we have the same problem. Let's get rid of it. We haven't had any killings with an AR-15 since we banned those. Let's go on that same train of thought. And then so we say it's it's the rate of fire and it's the capacity of the magazine. Now next we have a Sega 12, which is a shotgun that can have a drum on it that holds 20 rounds, and that also fires at the semi-automatic one trigger pull, one bullet pace, and it's built on the Kalashnikov like AK-47 platform. So now you have the same problem, right? And then
so basically we're playing whack-a-mole.
We're playing whack-a-mole, and we're just going down a line of this isn't the public enemy yet, so let's get rid of it. Now next one, oh, that's the public enemy.
That's I don't want that at all.
And
so I think at some point the national debate is going to go to how many like bullets per second or something like that. I think that's where it's going to shift to. But the whole to your point is I don't think we should be playing a whack-a-mole and just like that one's wrong while these other 20 are the same thing.
Yep.
Right.
And I think it does get worrying. And again, I'm speaking from like almost a devil's advocate, trying to come up with points that.
But that's and this is the discussion we need to be having. Because we're not hearing this as much as we're hearing this side and way over here.
Yeah, never infringe on my right ever.
Right.
Like I'm definitely not from that party, but I do. I guess when you look at the Second Amendment, right? People can bring up hunting and they can bring up home defense all they want, but that's not necessarily even what the Second Amendment says. Those are technically the easiest to get rid of. So like, nope, you're not allowed to hunt. You're not allowed to protect your home because this is what the Second Amendment says. And then at that point, people who do follow, I guess, a stricter interpretation of the Second Amendment say, well, at what point is the government allowed to tell me what guns I'm allowed to stand against their tyranny with?
Right. And that's a huge part of it. For me, again, not to always bring it back to sports, but it's what I know pretty well. But like coming out at like Jack Trice Stadium or Kinnick Stadium, almost every professional or almost every stadium, you get tunneled. And it scares me to death. It's in the back of my mind now when I go out of games. What happens if somebody comes by and nobody has the right to take out 60 people in like that? And at the end of the day, do we have a guest caller?
We don't. We have an unknown caller. So that's a muted caller is what it is. Yeah.
But no, at the end of the day, to me, I don't think anybody has the right to do that. But again, I'm here for dialogue. I'm willing to discuss it with folks and try to find some sort of conclusion.
Definitely, and I'm all on board with public safety. I guess I went to Afghanistan for a brief deployment in 2012, So, it kind of reframes your mindset, especially upon that like first year or two when you're back in the States, where
Right.
like you do see the danger that is present at all times. Like when you're walking out of a stadium like that, like, oh, I'm not a fan of how bunched in I am right here. Like, and
Well, thank you for your service. By the way.
no. That's the Sergeant Bluff way to do things. I graduated from high school and joined with like 25% of my graduating class, so that was
And I mean that's consistent throughout this district, and so I'm proud of that. I'm proud that we have such a that's part of Iowa, and so I went a different route, but it's all ingrained in it, and honestly, coming from my point of view is I don't think we do enough for veterans, and one of the many things that I want to do is kind of modernize a little bit, kind of the way of thinking. I came, like I mentioned, I lived in Seattle, and medical marijuana, well, all recreational became legal there, and I don't do the stuff. I could care less about it, but what I want to do is take it off Schedule 1. For the number one reason is so we can offer it to vets with PTSD to, instead of taking uppers to get up in the morning and downers to get down at night, to offer it so the VA could potentially prescribe it. So.
And yes, I guess like I'm 27. So I probably am still in the prime age for the marijuana consumption demographic, but I've just it's never really been my thing.
Yeah.
And
now beer, on the other hand.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very pro beer. Don't institute any prohibition on that. But I guess even looking at like policy and the way things go is looking at like Colorado or Seattle, and I'd like to consider myself a statistics and evidence guy.
Yeah. And
I haven't seen any negative repercussions of
as far as recreational, when it became legal, the same city parks that smelled like weed still smelled like weed. I noticed no difference. If anything, and this is at a time when I wasn't as politically active, so like the money that was going to the state, I didn't necessarily see, but a lot of that went into education, so I was far past that. But yeah, they were able to raise a ton of money for the state, and they were still working on some laws because it didn't really match up with, like the way they did it was kind of based on prohibition, and so there was a lot of weird rules like I don't know all of it. I'm not an expert, but I think when you grow something, then it was put to a distribution place. And then when it's distributed, like the distributions, I can't speak today, distribution center, if it was like about 45 minutes to an hour from Seattle, they had to make multiple stops. They can't do that. They had to go like one back, the other back, and like stuff like that. And they weren't allowed to have any armed protection,
which is weird,
because you had $1 million of weed.
You had to do it all in all cash. I know,
right?
When it started in Colorado, everything had to be cash because the federal government wouldn't allow
the banking system. Yep.
Which is very horrifying.
Right.
And so it is scary. And I guess like in terms of like the overall legislation, I guess opponents to it, everything that they're saying is like hypotheticals of why it shouldn't be nationwide legalized. I'm just not seeing that play out.
I want it to be rescheduled, and then I want for recreational use. I would leave it up to each state.
Okay. Yep. And that's fair. I think that's a very
surprisingly that question pops up on the campaign trail way more than I ever thought it would be. And
really?
it's not like in Ames, and it's not like younger people. It's older people.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna name any names here, but like even during my time in the military, basically like any guy who was starting to get into that like 50-year-old age range where they're starting to look at what's going to happen after they get out of the military, like they'll have these conversations where like, as soon as I get out, I'm gonna try weed for the first time. I got a neighbor, I know he's got some. He said he'll sell to me. I'm going to go over there for the first time, and it's like
well, the one thing I will say that also and I heard this, is that it's not necessarily easier to buy because like the store hours and like all that stuff. It's probably easier just going to your neighborhood park.
Yeah.
But the quality of stuff was consistent and like they knew what they were buying. Whereas this underlying market, I don't know.
I think there's something to be said for not having to go to your neighborhood park where, the guy, as it stands right now, is a criminal, which is forcing your average citizen to do business with a criminal, and you get robbed. It's tough to go to the police after you got robbed for $40, and I guess. But yeah, and I've seen like that same weird prohibition mindset play out with. I got a buddy who's just started a brewery here in Sioux City called Brew City. Shout out to their beer; it's really good. Actually,
at Marty's Tap.
Marty's Tap.
I was just there the other day.
Kelly Quinn and Matt Hubert are running that, but I've seen them have to go through that.
I played baseball with Kelly Quinn when I think we were like he was 15, I was 14.
Well, now he runs a damn fine establishment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they've had to like. Just the way that laws are set up, like they have to sell their beer to a distributor and buy it back from the distributor to be able to sell it in the bar that they own that they're also brewing in.
Yeah, no, there are weird things that go along with that, and but I'll say this is that like what he's trying to do and what they're working on here, that when I was looking at moving back and since I've been back, I love seeing that. I love seeing stuff like that pop up in Sioux City, and I love what you're doing with this. Growing up here. It was a lot of people want to move away, and I get that. I did it, but when you get older and you realize like this is home, and you see the opportunities out here, like what we were mentioning earlier before we went on air, is there's so much opportunity, and it's you get to decide it, and because some of the other costs of living aren't as high as Minneapolis or Omaha or Seattle or wherever. There's so much potential here, and that's one thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in the next like 10 years here in Sioux City. Because, like I mentioned, part of my campaign is about putting a spotlight on Sioux City and really trying to make it grow for the next generation. And it's I happen to be 38, and I want 40 and under people to really invest in this city, and we can take it over.
Yeah, I'm behind that. I think that'd be nothing but positives on my end. And I guess like doing the freelance video stuff that I do, I found it's just best to live in Sioux City, work in Sioux City primarily, and then I'll be able to travel for jobs on day jobs to Minneapolis, to Omaha, where budgets might be a little bit bigger. And I do just love being here, and my time in the Air National Guard, I was able to spend like a month in multiple different cities for training. And I guess like the one thing that I always realized after the first 2 weeks of going, oh my God, there's so much to do here, is that I just started to miss the way that people were open to like saying something nice to you when you hold open a door for somebody and they like want to go, oh hey, thanks, I really appreciate that, where you don't get that so much.
In Seattle it was horrible. I threw for 4th of July, I threw a block party, and my neighbors were like blown away by it. They're like, people don't do stuff like that here. I'm like, this is what we do. Like you come together as neighbors. Like our neighbors, like you could live years and never know your neighbor in Seattle, and that drives me insane. Like it's about this community, and that's what I love about this place. I go back to the East High basketball games, and I still know most people in the stands, and like it's who we are, and we support each other, and at the end of the day, like if somebody's car is in a snowbank, it doesn't matter if I don't ask them if they're Republican or what their stance is on the healthcare bill or anything like that. We help them out, and that's what I'm trying to get back in trying to, I don't know, swing the pendulum to put us back into decency in politics and some sort of compromise, and at the end of the day, I'm here to listen. I'm here to work. I'm not here to just tell you what I think, and I feel that's lacking in DC, and I'm just extremely frustrated with what's happening in DC, and I want to change, and so I'm not one to sit on the sideline, and so I said, you know what, that's what I want to do. and I absolutely love what I'm doing, and I'm having a blast.
Awesome. So let's back it up. Let's talk about you come out of high school. You're a baseball player.
Yep.
Did you go to Morningside on a scholarship?
Or? My dad was a baseball coach there for about 30 years, and I had a bunch of offers all over. But when your dad recruits you, it's kind of hard to say no. Mm-hmm. I had a great time. After my junior year, I had a chance to get drafted, and I turned it down, and I ended up going to University of Nebraska. My senior year, led the team in ERA, played in the College World Series, and then played up in Canada 4 different seasons with the Explorers, played in Belgium twice, played in Germany, and one of the last things I did with baseball was in 2013 as an amateur, I went with a team to Cuba and played their top teams in exhibition.
Awesome.
And, that was best on and off the field experience of my life.
Did you guys get worked in Cuba?
We were competitive. We have a couple ex-major leaguers.
Okay.
We were
salty.
pretty
Okay.
we were pretty salty. But we still lost every game.
Yeah.
And for diplomatic reasons, it might have been the best thing for us.
Yeah. And Fidel himself's a big baseball fan. He played pro, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, he almost he went to some sort of tryout and he didn't make it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if he ever officially played pro, but the baseball is such a big part of their culture, and it was cool because we just played these exhibition games. We get 5,000 people at the game. People were banging drums, going nuts. When I wasn't pitching, I would go up in the stands and meet a little bit of the folks.
That's awesome.
My 5 minutes worth of Spanish.
Yeah. Do you know how their school system works in Cuba with in regards to sports?
No.
I was just listening to Yoel Romero. We got the issues today. Yeah, Yoel Romero is he's a Cuban ex-national who I think he technically defected from Cuba to originally through Germany to America to compete in the UFC, and he's the top dog right now. And he was explaining how he was 6 years old. His dad was a pro boxer. He wanted to be a pro boxer, but he was a better wrestler. So they go to these exhibition days where you take 10 5-year-old kids into a room and you go through wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, what have you.
Yeah.
And then they basically all the coaches for these programs are there watching them. And then a wrestling coach was like, "You are a wrestler. You're a wrestler for the state or for the nation of Cuba now." And they take this kid and they take all kids who they choose for the program, and they put them into a wrestling program. And it's Spartan, I guess, where they go from it's a military style school where it's not necessarily kids are getting whipped, but they're on campus from Monday through Friday and then go home on the weekends. But Monday you're up at 7 a.m. and you're eating breakfast with the team. 8 to noon you're in class, and that's when you're in school is 8 to noon, and then for the rest of the day it's full on wrestling. Whatever your program is, you're in training for that right away. And he was saying that even when you get into the point where you're training for the Olympics, and this is from day one when you're a little kid to the point where you're training for the Olympics, the first best kid in the program gets to eat steak and lobster, whatever he wants to eat for meals, right? And then the number 2 kid in the program doesn't even get to sit at the same table as number 1 and doesn't get steak or lobster. And he said, it just nuts. Creates this insane level of competition amongst these kids where and you're living together, so when somebody's wrist is hurting a little bit, and then that kid, so then the next day when you're having wrestle offs, everybody's going right for the number 1's wrist, or everybody's going for the kid when they know he has the flu or whatever it is. And I guess it's just insane, and it's just how all their sport programs there are. And that's why I assumed you guys got worked when you went over to Cuba, just because when you're raised in a system like that, it's so much different.
Absolutely. And I have hundreds of stories from being there, but the other weird part about them is they made a deal with Venezuela when Venezuela had
money.
Right. When they're not what they are today, but they traded doctors for oil.
Really?
And because they had their school system is so set up to have all these, and they exported their doctors.
I remember it was a urban legend, I guess, in 2012, one of those things that start showing up on Facebook that Cuba had come up with a cure for cancer, and
Right.
because of trade embargoes, like America wasn't allowed to have. But yeah, it does, and that's what Yoel Romero was speaking to that, like where it's like, yeah, we do create some of the best, name
Right.
it. We do create some of the best, but it's determined when you're 5 years old,
Right.
And
I'll say this, like the Cuba people are I say the most resilient people I've ever seen in my life. I'll say are the Cuban people. I mean, they can rebuild old cars. They can do everything. Also, farmers.
Yeah.
and just like I love going to old farms and going to some of our family friends and seeing kind of how they what they can come up with on their own. Because I mean, you can't always get a plumber out, and you can't always get a lot of folks out. So
yeah, I got my dad's dad, so my grandpa on my dad's side grew up on a farm, and it's very much the same way. And like even my dad was like growing up, we were comfortably middle class, right?
Yeah.
But like there was always like this a new wall need to be framed in the basement, and like the insane idea that we might hire somebody to do that rather than like, we know how to do it. Why wouldn't we go downstairs and do this ourselves?
Right.
Like that. No. I remember being so confused by that as a kid, into high school and stuff, and then getting out and being my age now and being like, oh, I get it. Yeah. I get the pride in doing things yourself.
Absolutely.
And, I'm on board with that.
It's weird for me because being a fifth generation Iowan, but I was the first generation to be raised in a city. Mm-hmm. Both my parents grew up on farms, but they're very urbanites. Oh, yeah. Yep. It's really
they were ready to be gone.
I guess. Yeah. I don't know. It's weird, but I don't know.
Awesome. So like, leaving Nebraska, once you get out of Nebraska, did you go straight to pro ball at that point?
Yeah, so I was done with my eligibility, but I wasn't done with college. Don't transfer your senior year. Okay. When you're almost done, just go ahead and finish at that school.
I did it, by the way.
Well, I know.
It was a 7. I got my degree, my undergrad in 7 years. So,
oh,
yeah, I'm familiar with
the
there
you
go. That made. Yeah.
And so I ended up going back, and I didn't get drafted after Nebraska, and so I went to a bunch of different tryouts. Mm-hmm. And I ended up landing on a team up in Canada, and that's kind of, I got my foot in the door up there, and then halfway through that season, I ended up coming back and playing with the Explorers, mm-hmm. and it was I talk about how baseball is the best and worst job I ever had. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When things were going great, there's not a better thing in the world. You pitch a great game mm-hmm. on those hot summer nights where you're all sweaty and you grab a beer and go in the shower. Mm-hmm. Yep. I love having beer in the shower.
Shower beers that's an American tradition there.
Exactly. Yeah. But then when you can barely lift your shoulder and you have to 10-hour bus ride to the next place and you got to pitch that night and you're on the verge of getting cut. Mm-hmm. It's a very lonely place, and mentally and physically, it's a grind. Mm-hmm. I was talking with Jason Kander last night about baseball, and he went to a Kansas City Royals fantasy camp, and he was like telling me how much his body was sore. Yeah. I was like, oh, I get it. But to me, I don't know. I that time in my life was very magical, and I have a lot of friends who are musicians, mm-hmm. and a lot of them talk about their time on the road, and it's very comparable. And honestly, it really translates well into running for Congress, mm-hmm. Because, I mean, my version of running for Congress is not staying in one spot and raising a ton of money and just doing TV ads to get your name out. Mm-hmm. My version of Congress is I'm an underdog. I gotta scratch and fight for every little publicity I can, and it's getting out to the people. Mm-hmm. And I've put on over 30,000 miles on my car since we launched.
Wow.
But you know what? At the end of the day, it's what I want to be doing, and mm-hmm. I'm having a great time, and it's what's in my heart.
So what did the connection from, you step away from baseball, into your professional career, and then now to to getting involved in politics? What does that transition look like?
Traditionally, not the route I took.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to law school, and I didn't have any attorneys in my family, and so I got a paralegal degree to get my foot in the door and see where it goes. And about the time I was going to go to law school was about 2008, and that's when the economy collapsed a little bit, and a lot of the kids I worked with, people my age, men and women my age, who were all attorneys, the majority of them were telling me don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
We worked at a pretty prestigious law firm, and they all said, like, a lot of them went to law school to work at our law firm, but like they were burnt out after 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't go, and so I kind of found a niche in intellectual property and e-discovery and trials, and I liked it, and I had a lot of good time doing it, and it was a good career. But then, like I mentioned, that article about life's about the pursuit of meaningfulness.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing more meaningful than fighting for something you truly believe and what's absolutely in your heart, and fighting for, like, your home.
Absolutely. Yep.
And
that's why I talk about that, tend to get in this conversation, feel like time after time on this podcast, about like the traditional Midwest upbringing, which is rooted around like the education path.
Yeah.
Where it's okay, you got out of high school, what college are you going to go to that's
Right.
going to set you up best for your next step? What degree are you going to get that has a guaranteed job on the back end? You
Right.
know, are you going to be an accountant? Are you going to go to pre-med? Are you going to go to pre-law? And then like kind of like the disillusionment with people exiting those programs,
Right.
where they start going, I've been doing this for 3 years and I don't like it, and I invested 8 years into this degree.
And that's exactly right. And part of what I want to do, like, we don't have an economy in this district that absorbs a college student.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at jobs to try to do when I was coming back home, and the best I could find is like a $15 an hour job.
Mm-hmm.
And like I freelance, and I mean I make a heck of a lot more than $15 an hour.
Yeah.
And but that being said, I like to say this on the campaign trail too, is that the average person in Congress is 57 years old and net worth $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm 19 years younger and just short of $1 million shy.
Yeah. There you go. I like that. That's good. That's good.
No, I'm very much a working class kid, and we got endorsed by several working class groups that are trying to get income diversity into Congress.
Great.
And so that's a huge part of our message.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, to your point, like, it's exactly right, and that's something that I feel like this district's missing, and that's why, like, some of the technology and innovation areas that I was working in Seattle, I want to bring some of that here. And it's not bringing those companies here, it's bringing the technology here and having, like, us create these things.
Exactly.
And it kind of goes with my view of what politics should be like. We should organically grow it and then send it outwards rather than
absolutely
the other way around.
Basically outsource it in at that point. And
right.
I think that there's like so much to be said for the way that a culture of business in a downtown area or whatever supports things like co-working spaces, where we do have that with Springboard co-working in Sioux City, but not really. The community hasn't seemed to rally around that the way that they do in even cities like Des Moines or Iowa City or Omaha, or like artist co-op spaces, or even like incubators, where you can basically foster top-level tech companies in a local area where you provide them offices and resources, and then like the way it works in a lot of incubators is they will have like an agreement that you'll run it within our community for 5 years post launch or whatever. So.
And I think it's extremely important to get those in the rural communities here, not in just Sioux City, because what's going to happen in agriculture the next 10, 15 years is going to be fascinating with the amount of technology that's getting involved with them and the precision technology. I get really excited when we talk about the technology in agriculture.
Yep.
And so, but I mean, there's technology is going to come here, and when it comes here, we got to be ready for it, because
Absolutely.
if we don't, it's going to be a major missed opportunity.
And how do you think that we do like draw that in?
Well, I think it's what I don't want to do is what the state did with like Apple, where we just, for a data center, we gave them a huge tax break, because that's not creating. It was like 50 jobs for giving them hundreds of millions in tax breaks. That's not what I want to do. What I want to do is bring in whether it's training or like what we're seeing in Ames. There's a company called Workiva, and they're doing a lot of the things I saw in Seattle, and working with different companies and feeding off other companies, and it's stuff like that, and it's not just. I'm trying to figure out the correct way of saying this, because it's not just like, here are the utensils, figure it out yourself. It's we got to find a way to get people with the right tools and prepare them in the right way. The number one problem I feel the economy, and that's just not this district, it's all of America, is that we haven't had an answer to globalization as it affects the working class.
Yes.
So like a lot of our jobs have been shipped across because of trade agreements for different reasons. And until we address that, I feel the problem with the middle class is going to continue to be there. And that's one thing I really want to work on and focus a lot of our campaign on, and because there are solutions, but it's going to take a lot of effort on several different and compromises, working on the other side together. It's definitely not, as far as I'm concerned, with that tax bill. That tax bill, I just feel it attacks who we are. A couple people might have received like $40 a week extra. Well, Berkshire Hathaway got $29 billion.
Yeah.
And that's $29 billion that's going to be taken away from our infrastructure, which we need to build a smart grid, amongst other things. It's taken away from Medicaid. You go into some of these small communities, the number one building, the biggest building in some of these smaller towns are the retirement homes. And so if we cut on Medicaid, then we're cutting the funding for a lot of these retirement homes. And if we're going to have to consolidate retirement homes, you have to travel an hour to go see your great grandma. And that's only losing jobs in this district. So, that's the one big thing I'm very passionate about, is how that GOP tax bill has just ruined, potentially disastrous for our economy.
That's interesting, and it's just like a space that I'm not familiar with.
Right.
So it's something that
So it's my job to tell you.
Exactly. Yeah.
And to tell you guys.
But a space that I am familiar with is, and it like makes me sick to think about, is the way that net neutrality has just been dismantled by unelected representatives.
Yes.
And, by basically strong arming through by. Basically a Verizon employee still, as I think we can say that at this point. And all of the reasons given were turning out to be lies. The justification given to Congress was wrong. And the things that we were told that we weren't going to have to worry about as consumers are already happening. Where AT&T's created fast lanes already for their own content, and as somebody who puts out content, that I'm already giving this away for free.
Right.
I don't want to have to pay a corporation to let people see my stuff that I'm already making for free, get it for free. You know?
Right.
It's like,
and that's exactly right. And there again, politicians are putting corporations above people. But we have the opportunity to take that back. the tweet I tweeted today, but it was meant for the national walkout. But it was the Boston Tea Party is to the American Revolution as the national walkout is to blank. Mm-hmm. We get to decide what that answer is, and it's the same with that. And that's, I'm going around telling folks, is like, I hear a lot of the same things, like, oh, Steve King can't be beat. Mm-hmm. And it's an institution and all this stuff. You know what? We get to decide that. And I'm trying to go and talk to folks, especially younger folks who traditionally haven't even voted, mm-hmm. or don't know the issues because they're trying to find their careers and their paths and everything like that, and tell them, hey, just because you're younger doesn't mean you don't have a voice. Mm-hmm. And right now the youth voice is getting loud, and
certainly,
and that's been my vision from day one. Mm-hmm. So
great. So this brings us into a segment that we have. Ooh. It's the what do you think is the most slept on thing in Sioux City? It can be anything. It can be a band, restaurant, anything. A company in Sioux City, just that you think everybody should know about because you love it.
Well, okay. My I'm a Miles Inn guy.
Ooh.
I might have had a drink there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's just say I've been going there for a while. The same bartenders have been there forever, and now a kid I went to high school with now owns it. And okay. So you always got to have a Charlie boy, maybe 2, never 3.
There you go. There you go. That third's dangerous, right?
And a good schooner. You don't know how many people have traveled to Sioux City nationally to help on our campaign or to interview me for something. Mm-hmm. I always bring them there.
Love it.
Because, like, to me, that exemplifies what Sioux City is above everything else. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I love that place. I could go there. And following right up on it is Bob Rose. Like, those Solid. Are 2 mornings. I'm from the Morningside part of town. Those are places I've been going to for a long time. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Love it. Those are new.
Yeah.
Those were new contributions to the segment. And mine is Eddie's in Sergeant Bluff.
Oh.
Eddie's Tavern in Sergeant Bluff. So following up the 2 bars with another bar. I just cannot say enough positive things about their hot wings there. If you get their hot wings, you got to get them naked. That's the key. You have to get them naked with the buffalo sauce on the side.
Okay.
And I will put them against any hot wing in the world,
Ooh.
Including Bob Rose. So it's just, they're so good. And everybody I tell to go there is...
do they have other sauces other than...
They have a Asian chili, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, they have...
Because I'm 100% Midwest. Anything above ketchup makes me sweat.
Oh, there you go. Yep. And they have... The Asian sweet chili is pretty good.
Okay.
And then they have just great bartenders. And I'm Sergeant Bluff originally, so I'm pretty biased. But then they...
When are you going to invite me over?
Soon, whenever you want to go, because on especially the best day to go is Hawkeye football game days, and actually Hawkeye football, Nebraska football, Iowa State. This might be the best kept secret in Sioux City, is if you walk in there wearing, for example, a Hawkeye shirt.
Yeah.
For every Hawkeye touchdown, they give a free beer to everybody in the bar with a Hawkeye shirt on.
Very cool.
And I think field goals are $1 beers. So,
I love it.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you go there for those preseason opener games, and you can get some
those 44-0 games.
Yeah, you can have 6 beers for free there. So, I recommend it. It's
Bring it on,
spot.
Ball State.
Yeah.
Come into
Exactly. Everybody's like, Iowa needs to toughen up their schedule like Alabama does preseason.
No.
I'm like, I'm looking at beers flying out the window if you do that. Let's keep it loose at the beginning. We need some tune-up games.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
All right.
And I will say this before we go. I heard somebody on your show here mention about if you put in 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, you can achieve whatever you want to do it. Mm-hmm. And I completely agree with it. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I'm more than 12 hours, and I'm doing it 7 hours a day. But that's exactly what everything I have in this election, I'm everything I have in my life, I'm putting towards this election. And if I can give a quick little plug.
Please let people know what your message is and where to find you at.
Scholtenforiowa.com. That's SCHOLTEN, 4, IOWA.com. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that jazz. We're really active on Twitter. We have over 35,000 followers on Twitter and continue to grow every day. But yeah, and we have a lovely website too. So
awesome, thank you.
And if you want to get active, and we have plenty. We have over 500 registered volunteers. We got a strong movement here, and like I tell folks, is our campaign's about beating Steve King, but our movement is about reestablishing what we want in this district, and we get to decide that. And it's very much a youth movement, and thank you for having me on your show. This is awesome.
It's been a pleasure, and thanks. Yeah. It's nice meeting you. Nice talking to
Likewise.
you. And that's it for today. Thank you so much. If you can check this out on YouTube, it'd be great to subscribe. Leave a comment in the comments, I guess. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Like our Facebook page, Honeywave Media. This is the Sioux City Show, and I'm Taylor Grote. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you.